The insult landed before his suitcase did. "We don't accept your kind here," the receptionist said, and the lavender he'd chosen to calm weary travelers turned to iron in his lungs. The chandelier he'd argued for cast tiny rainbows over the marble, light he had paid for, light that fell on him as if he were a stranger trespassing in his own dream. Before we begin, if this kind of story speaks to your heart, feel free to share where you're watching from. It's always beautiful to see how far stories like this can travel. Enjoy the story. Chapter 1, Marble and Rain. Columbus, Ohio slept under a wet sky, the kind that polished everything it touched: bus stops, maple leaves, the glass front of the Sterling Heights Hotel. When Marcus Everett pushed through the revolving door, his leather loafers whispered against the marble, each step a slow exhale after a day made longer by a grounded flight in Chicago and a weather-warped itinerary. He wanted nothing more than a bed, not his bed, just a bed that wouldn't argue when he dropped into it. He carried a light backpack slung on one shoulder, the gray canvas darkened at the seams from travel. Navy blazer with brass buttons, open white collar jeans, no entourage. No watch that could buy a car. Even his phone stayed in his pocket, as if he were deliberately resisting the gravity of who he was. He had designed this space to feel like a promise kept. The chandelier, crystal tears draped like suspended rain, cast prismatic flecks on the gold-veined walls. Velvet chairs such a deep green they almost drank the light. Music lilted low from hidden speakers, brushed drums, a lazy trumpet. And the air smelled faintly of lavender, not the powdery kind that lived in old drawers, but a clean ribbon of scent he'd chosen because it smelled like his mother's porch in July. He wanted people to breathe in generosity when they crossed this threshold. He paused at the hearth to feel the heat kiss his hands. He'd built lobbies for exactly this, the moment you surrender to warmth and say, "Fine, the world can wait." Then he approached the front desk. Lydia Harper stood under the soft cone of a desk lamp, her hazel eyes catching light like glass marbles. Late 20s, sharp ponytail, nails lacquered red. Her Sterling Heights vest nipped perfectly at the waist, the crisp white of her shirt collar framing a face that right now wore the kind of smile that didn't make it to the eyes. She had a glossy travel magazine open in front of her, a corner of its page bent like an impatient finger. "Good evening," she said, 2 syllables lengthened into a question. "Checking in," Marcus replied. "Everett, Marcus." She arched one brow. The red tips of her nails began a little impatient metronome on the keyboard. "Everett, click, mm." Her gaze flicked up and down, taking in blazer jeans, the absence of a garment bag, the backpack, particularly the backpack, as if it were a credential he'd failed to decorate properly. "I don't see you on the list." "There's always an owner's hold," he said, voice steady because he'd learned to keep it that way. "Suite 1400, she blinked, a pause you could fit a dismissal into, then, "We're fully committed tonight, game weekend." She tilted her head, an apology in form only, guests only. The word guests felt like a velvet rope snapped across his chest. He took a breath. He had taken breaths like this before. At 25, standing in a boardroom in Chicago where men smiled at him like they already knew how this story ended, with him being told to dream smaller. At 32, when a loan officer mispronounced his name 4 times and then told him hotels were ambitious for a man like you. At 40, watching a bellman ignore the cab he flagged and open the door for a couple who'd arrived after him. There was always a rope. There was always a breath you had to take before deciding whether to step over or cut it. "Run the name again," he said softly. "Everett, Marcus, I'm the owner." Lydia laughed. It wasn't unkind. Unkindness would have been simpler. It was indulgent. "Right." She tapped a glossy nail against the desk bell, not pressing, just letting metal kiss metal. "I'll get the manager." Across the lobby, a couple in camel coats lifted their heads. By the window, a man with a laptop stopped typing but kept his fingers poised as if he disliked admitting a story could pull him in. The lavender felt like theater smoke now, something beautiful that hid the stage wires. Behind the desk, Lydia reached for the phone with the self-possession of someone who believes her job is to keep doors. "Mr. Carter, I have a situation, a walk-in insisting he's the owner, no reservation." Marcus watched her mouth shape the word insisting. He thought of his father's hands, how bleach had crept under the nails no matter how hard you scrubbed. The memory rose without permission, a hotel lobby in Detroit, midnight, a man spilling whiskey and calling his father boy every time he wanted ice. His father had knelt without arguing, without looking up. That was the night Marcus learned you could be invisible even while someone watched you work. The phone clicked. "He'll be right out," Lydia said. Her smile returned, brighter now. "If you'd like to wait over there," she gestured toward a bench that seemed designed for apologies. Marcus didn't move. He did not lower his voice when he said, "I can wait right here." Chapter 2. The chill Tom Carter emerged from the back office in a rush that tried to look like composure. Early 30s, glasses, tie loosened in compromise to a long day. He carried his uncertainty in a rigid spine. "Good evening," Tom said, aiming for cordial but landing near careful. "I understand there's some confusion." "No confusion," Marcus said. "I'm Marcus Everett. I own this hotel." He shifted his backpack higher. He felt ridiculous suddenly, the strap digging into muscle, as if the bag itself somehow confirmed Lydia's read of him, as if owners arrived in car services with luggage that announced them. Tom glanced at Lydia, who rolled her eyes a degree so small you needed familiarity to see it. Lydia tilted the computer screen slightly Tom's way as if to protect him from an embarrassment she seemed eager for Marcus to suffer. Tom smiled a queasy smile. "I just need to verify." "Of course," Marcus said. The words tasted like pennies. "You can see he doesn't have a reservation," Lydia said. There was a new edge in her tone now, a triumphant little chime. "And the suite is held for, on hold for the owner," Tom corrected, but softly and as if the rule were theoretical. Lydia pressed one manicured finger to the desk, leaned in an inch. "We're full, Tom. People are waiting." People are waiting. The couple on the hearth couch, now leaning into each other in clinical fascination. The laptop man, whose smirk had thawed to something like interest. A bellman fiddling with his cufflink, eyes bright with the joy of a story he'd be telling later. The room had gathered around a center of weight, and that center was him. He considered, just for a flash, humoring them, pulling up the deed's PDF. Forcing the system to recognize him by brandishing credentials, letting the lobby bear witness as the computer named him owner in white text on a blue glow. He pictured the satisfaction, but also the canyon he'd drop into once the proof was offered, the canyon of being seen only because you had a piece of paper, a seal. Something else moved. Squeaky wheels cut across the carpet. A housekeeping cart rolled near the coffee bar, pushed by a woman whose bun had loosened in a way that looked earned. Gloria. He remembered her name not because he had a photographic memory, he did not, but because he had written it by hand in a thank-you note 5 years ago. She'd sat with a crying mother in this very lobby while the baby howled in fever. She'd brought tea, then a blanket, then the courage to ask for a doctor. He'd seen that. It had mattered. Gloria's gaze found him. She froze for half a beat, then angled the cart toward the desk like a ship changing course to offer rescue. "That's him," she said into the tense air. Her voice was steady in the way of people who have had to be steady to survive. "That's Mr. Everett." Lydia's laugh this time cut thinner like something fragile chipped. "Please," she said. "We, Gloria," Tom said, a warning in his voice, but even he turned to look at Marcus with a new doubt-altered shape. Gloria didn't drop her eyes. "I was here the day he cut the ribbon. I was new and my hands were shaking. He shook them anyway." She turned slightly so Marcus could see the edge of her smile. "You told me my work mattered." Behind Tom's glasses, his pupils widened barely, then sharpened into action. He pivoted to the computer. "Pull the owner's file," he told Lydia. She hesitated, a heartbeat, but in it was everything. Then she tapped. The screen lit her face in aquarium blue. She went still, lips parting, breath catching. The letters didn't just name him, they indicted her. Owner holds Suite 1400. 24/7 access, CEO Marcus Everett. Tom's face lost color. "Mr. Everett," he stammered. There must have been a mix-up," Marcus supplied, not because he believed it, but because he needed one word to absorb the rage before it did its work on him. He kept his face even because he knew rage was expected. He refused to wear what they expected. Lydia's hand trembled as she reached, not for him, but for order, for anything that would restore the hierarchy she understood. "I didn't," her voice thinned. "I didn't know." "You didn't ask," Marcus said. He felt the old ache that sat behind his sternum light. He thought of his father again, of bleach and stained hands, and the way his father once said, "Work so quiet they forget the janitor's name." He had promised himself he'd make buildings where no one had to be quiet to be seen. And here he was in a sanctuary that sent him to a bench. He pulled his phone from his pocket as if he were reaching for a handhold in a dark stairwell, and hit a number that had changed his life 9 years ago. The call lasted less than 20 seconds. "It's Everett," he said when it was answered. "Sterling Heights, Columbus, denied access at the desk. I'll wait." He didn't say hurry, he didn't have to. Chapter 3, systems minutes later, the elevator chimed once. The doors parted. 2 men stepped out with the snap of air-conditioned authority. James Holt moved first, a gray suit that fit like it had no other work than to fit him. He had a jaw you could slice paper on. His badge read Regional Director. The other, Ethan Ruiz, wore a company polo, a silver tablet in his hands like a shield that also happened to be a sword. District Manager. "Mr. Everett," James said, closing distance efficiently. "We're here." No apology in the greeting, because apology would come after order. "Suite 1400 is being prepared as we speak." "Black coffee," Ethan added, already swiping as if he were cutting red tape with his thumb. "Fresh towels." "Late checkout. Maintenance is checking the thermostat. It runs cold with this weather." "You can apologize to the gentleman from the bench," Lydia blurted, voice climbing as if it were attempting escape. "And then what? Everyone makes mistakes. This is—" James didn't look at her. "Lydia Harper." He said, still watching Marcus, "I want your badge." Her fingers flew to the silver pin at her breast, the Sterling Heights crest etched there. She did not move to unclasp it. "What?" "Badge," James repeated, finally letting his gaze rest on her fully, precisely, as if his attention cost something he was now willing to spend. "Now, what are we doing?" Tom asked, the question both procedural and pleading. His tie had become a bright noose. "We are enforcing the values you recite at every staff meeting," James said. "We don't practice them selectively." Lydia had flushed high in the cheeks. "No one told me what he looked like," she snapped. "It's not my fault he—" "Looks like he was tired and wearing a backpack," Marcus said. It emerged level, but the syllables were edged in flint. Silence took a seat with them. Lydia's eyes skimmed the lobby, looking for support and finding only audience. The couple by the hearth looked down like schoolchildren who didn't want to be called on. The laptop man closed his computer with a soft, guilty click. The bellman found urgent interest in aligning luggage tags. "Give me your badge," James said again, still quiet. He did not have to raise his voice. The room had already amplified him. Lydia's hand shook as she unclasped the pin. She set it on the desk, metal whispering on marble. The sound was a small thing, but it made something inside Marcus unclench. "You're suspended pending retraining and review," James said. "Please collect your things." Tom swallowed audibly. "And me?" he asked. The question came out of him like a confession. James turned slowly. "Administrative leave, effective now." "It was a miscommunication," Tom started. Ethan's tablet pinged. "It wasn't," he said without looking up. Owner hold override was entered at 1832 to accommodate a VIP late arrival. Notes show Harper asked Carter for approval, told her she had discretion on slow nights. He tilted the screen to James for a second, then returned to swiping. She also marked Mr. Everett as no reservation, insistently entitled. The air changed temperature. Even the chandelier seemed to hush its glitter. Marcus didn't look at the couple or the bellman or the man with the laptop. He didn't look at Tom, who had beginnings of tears caught in the angles of his glasses. He looked at Lydia. "You tried to sell my room," Marcus said, not because he cared about the square footage so much as the reflex behind the choice, "and then told me guests only." The phrase guests only felt like a thread he'd been pulling all his life. Lydia's chin went up. Defiance still glowed like the last ember of a fire that has too much pride to admit it's dying. "You looked like someone trying to get what you didn't pay for." "I built what you stand behind," he said. Gloria's cartwheel squeaked on cue, a small noise that felt like history clearing its throat. "That's the problem," Marcus added, voice low. "You didn't see me, so you decided what I must be." Her eyes filled and she blinked hard. He realized then that hers wasn't just shame, it was fear, the rawest kind, born when you understand the story you're in and dislike your part. "Mr. Everett," James said softly, turning back to him, "your suite is ready." "Thank you." Marcus took the keycard Ethan offered. The plastic was cool against his skin. He didn't move. He looked at Gloria. "Thank you," he said to her, and he meant it in an old way, a way that belonged to the person who had first held a broom in his hands and thought it felt like a sword. "Can you come up later? I want to talk." She nodded, lips pressing together to keep something steady inside. Then he turned to Lydia again. "There's a sign in the employee entrance," he said. "I wrote it the day this place opened." He spoke without glance to James, to Tom. He spoke like the sign had been written as a promise to which she was now accountable. It says, if you think you can tell who belongs here, you don't belong behind this desk. Lydia's breath hitched, the first involuntary sound of regret that wasn't defended by posture. Regret isn't one expression, it's a dozen little surrenders, eyes losing their burn, shoulders sliding from their squared set, the hands that had been so certain forgetting where to rest. He made her regret it instantly, not just with consequence, but with a mirror. He held the values she had repeated and turned them toward her until she had to see who had been standing on the other side of them. Chapter 4, Suite 1400, the elevator ride to the 14th floor was brief and too long. Doors whisked open onto a corridor lit by sconces that held their light like secrets. His keycard kissed the reader, green tick, latch thunking back. The door swung into a room he knew like a childhood house revisited after years away. Suite 1400 exhaled cedar and fresh linen. The couch angled toward floor-to-ceiling windows that framed Columbus in dots, traffic lights blinking like patient beacons. A small table held a white cup, steam curling from black coffee. A handwritten note leaned against it, slanted script, Mr. Everett, we're sorry. Kitchen. He set his backpack down, heard in the silence that followed something release inside his body he hadn't realized he'd been keeping at attention. The bed looked impossible and immediate. He didn't sit on it. He sat in the armchair by the window, the orange glow from High Street laying thin lines across the carpet. For the length of a few steady breaths, he let the moment wash the anger clean. Anger got things done, yes, but it also left residue on the hands that held it, and he had never liked the smell of it. His father's face drifted up from the bottom of memory. The photo in his office, his father in a blue uniform, a mop handle in one hand, the other lifted to wave at whoever was taking the picture. The smile tight and proud and tired. Marcus pressed his thumb to his eyelid until the image faded to color patches. He dropped his hand, picked up the phone. James, he said when the call connected, bring Ethan to 1400 and get me HR on standby. We're going to do more than fix a room. He set the phone down and closed his eyes. He listened to the city breathe. After a moment, he spoke into the quiet, not to the room but to a boy on a porch inhaling lavender in July. We're still building it, he said aloud. The Haven. A knock came soft as courtesy. Come in, he said. James and Ethan entered with the energy of men who had kept their names because they kept their promises. They sat where he gestured, notebooks out, though they both knew this wouldn't be the kind of meeting whose minutes could encompass it. I want training, Marcus said, hands steepled. Not a slideshow. People don't change from slogans. Ethan nodded. We've piloted an empathy module in Detroit, role-play, scenario labs, reflection. It's slower but sticks. Roll it company-wide, Marcus said. Mandatory with assessments, not attendance, and I want every manager trained to recognize their blind spots. We're going to stop mistaking polish for merit. James jotted. Yes, sir. And Tom? Marcus asked. James glanced at Ethan. Ethan looked up. He's on leave per protocol. I don't need a head, Marcus said. He surprised himself even as he said it. He wanted accountability, yes. He also wanted something else, change that did not just rearrange furniture. I need honesty. Pull his emails, his Slack threads. If he told Lydia to profile, I want him trained in a room that doesn't let him dodge that truth. If he can't own it, he can't lead. Ethan lifted a hand. There is one thing, sir. He turned the tablet so Marcus could see, a screenshot of a chat thread. Tom, game weekends are tough. Be vigilant. Trust your gut. Keep the brand strong. Another message from Lydia, should we keep locals from lingering? They make the lobby look less curated. Tom's reply, you know who makes us look good. Use your judgment. James exhaled sharp through his nose. That's not a dog whistle, he said. That's a whistle. Marcus stared at the screen a beat longer. He felt bone tired, but under the fatigue a clarity sparked. He had promised to build sanctuaries, he had to protect them too. Then we're not just doing training, he said. We're doing an audit, culture, policies, promotions. I want every property to know a mystery guest could be me. He almost smiled. I'm done announcing my arrivals. He met James's gaze, saw there a stilled respect, a recognition that this was the work that kept a company honest. And one more thing, Marcus added. Gloria, James smiled, genuinely for the first time that night, promote her. Give her shift supervisor, Marcus said, and ask her to help design the training. People listen to the ones who push carts and carry keys. They can tell when a script is lying. Ethan typed. Done. For the next 30 minutes, they built the skeleton of a new standard, not just boxes to tick, but posture to adopt. They would name a program, make it visible, the belonging standard. It would be printed as plainly as a fire safety plan and posted in every break room, not because paper changes hearts, but because it changes conversations. When they left, Marcus didn't go to bed. He opened his room's small safe and took out the cheapest, plainest thing he owned, a notebook with paper so thin it curled at the corners. He wrote, "See every guest as a person, not a picture in your head. Start there." Chapter 5, Aftershocks. Down in the lobby, while the espresso machine hissed, the particulars rearranged themselves in the wake of his call. Lydia stood behind the employee door, hands numb. The badge in her palm felt heavier now that it had no backing. She stared at the tiny crest and thought, unbidden, of the day she'd first pinned it on. She'd told her mother she'd made it, finally found a place that looked like those hotel commercials where lobby flowers were not just big but unnecessary. She had moved through this space like a tourist who thought she belonged because she had the right outfit. A supervisor she'd never seen before, midnight hair, calm eyes, approached. "Miss Harper." "Come with me," she said gently. "I didn't do anything other desk agents don't do," Lydia heard herself say. The sentence tried to recruit the entire staff to stand beside her. It arrived unsummoned, like a script she didn't remember rehearsing. The supervisor tilted her head. "Maybe that's the problem," she said. She didn't mean it cruelly. That almost made it worse. Tom gathered his things slowly, each paper a reminder he'd signed his name under something he was supposed to live. He had thought he was protecting the brand when he told Lydia to curate the lobby. He had never asked himself what it meant to be protection that looked like exclusion. He glanced once toward the chandelier as if expecting judgment to glitter there. Light simply did what it always did, reveal. The bellman slid a coffee across the counter toward Gloria when she returned from taking a call on the service phone. "You okay?" he asked, voice pitched low. Gloria nodded, thinking of the way Mr. Everett had said thank you, like the word could unlock a door by itself. She had arrived in this country 30 years ago with a phrasebook and a stubbornness that could clean any stain. She had seen men throw towels on the floor and wives look through her, and still she had warmed cups and tucked blankets around sleeping shoulders. Tonight felt different. Tonight, her years had stood up in the middle of the lobby and said, "We always belonged here." The couple at the hearth left without finishing their tea. The man with the laptop lingered by the door, then turned back and approached Gloria awkwardly. "I think I misread him," he said, and it was unclear whether he meant it for her or for himself. He looked like a person caught in the act of becoming a better version. "You can start again tomorrow," Gloria said, not because she was responsible for his growth, but because she knew the comfort of a morning that got to begin again. Chapter 6, A different night, a different story. Sleep came to Marcus like a truce. He sank without dreams, woke 3 hours later with one name already in his mouth. He dressed, no tie, sleeves rolled, and texted Gloria, "Come up if you can." She arrived 15 minutes later, hair damp at the edges, the line between night and morning not entirely erased from her face. "Sit," he said, waving away her instinct to stand. "I have a question only someone like you can answer." "Someone like me?" She raised her eyebrows. It could have been insult. It felt like invitation. "Someone who has seen it all," he said. "Someone the lobby doesn't always see." He leaned forward. "Do we treat the tired men and the mothers with babies and the people who don't match the brochure as if they belong?" Gloria considered. "Sometimes," she said. "Often, not always." She met his eyes. "Sometimes the nice words are only on posters." He nodded. He'd known it. He needed someone to say it without fear. "You remind me of someone," she added, half smiling, "a man from my first month here." He came to the opening in a suit that fit wrong. Her grin warmed. He hugged everyone like he didn't know he wasn't supposed to. "Your father couldn't come." The question punched breath from his lungs. "He was sick," Marcus said quietly. He stared at his hands. "He sent me a text that night." "The floor looks clean from here." Gloria's eyes softened. "He would be proud today." Marcus swallowed. The compliment found a place to rest deep where the ache had been. "He would tell me to mop the spots we missed," he said. They talked until the sky behind the city's buildings lightened from pewter to blue. They designed a small pilot for the training that wasn't training. Gloria would tell her stories. Not the ugly ones. The simple ones that indicted in their simplicity. A woman who tipped her with a smile, a boy who said thank you, a man who had asked her name and remembered it the next morning. When Gloria left, Marcus typed a message to James and Ethan. Implement by Friday. Use Columbus as a model, will announce. He signed it ME because he wanted the initials to land like a signature on the wall of a new wing. Chapter 7. Echo. The story left the lobby and did what stories do when they're true and heavy. It traveled. The laptop man wrote about it without names, confessed his first judgments, described the lavender and the sound of a badge on marble. He didn't upload a video. He did something harder. He wrote about his own assumptions plainly and admitted they had been wrong. The post was shared by a teacher in Toledo, then a nurse in Cleveland, then a chef in Cincinnati who had been told in one too many kitchens that he didn't look like a head chef. Marcus didn't orchestrate that echo, but he welcomed it. When a journalist called, he didn't offer a quote, he offered a promise. I built these hotels to be havens, he said. We failed last night, we're fixing it in daylight. HR called with the recommended actions. Tom would keep his job only if he completed a course designed by people who were not him. Lydia would return only if she agreed to a probation that included not just reading, but serving, a month shadowing housekeeping, a month shadowing Bell's staff, a month shadowing the night desk through the loneliest hours. She would not be at the front desk until she had stood behind 3 others. When they told her, Lydia stared at the floor. I'll do it, she said. I don't want to be the person I was last night. People rarely do, the HR director replied. The work is improving it. Gloria's promotion was announced at a staff meeting that began with coffee and ended with clapping and a few tears that were mostly not hers. She stood in front of people who had watched her push a cart down long hallways and felt taller not because of a badge but because of what the badge acknowledged. This is an honor, she said simply, but the point isn't me. The point is the way we look at people. The sign at the entrance changed. The Sterling Heights crest gleamed, and beneath it, a line added in deep brass script, You belong here. Some guests read it and smiled and kept walking. Some paused and touched the letters with fingers as if they might leave warmth. Chapter 8. The return 3 weeks later, on a Friday with a sky so blue it looked like a promise had been kept. Marcus returned to the lobby unannounced. He was not alone. He brought with him a small crew, 2 baristas from the cafe whose manager he'd poached from a jazz club in Milwaukee, a trainer who used to be a nurse, a retired bell captain who could make a suitcase look like it enjoyed the ride. They took stations in the corners where training hides best, near the coffee urn, beside the revolving door, under the chandelier. Guests came and went. A woman in a wrinkled blouse arrived with a toddler on her hip and a diaper bag that had ceased to pretend it was a tote. Lydia, not behind the desk, saw her from the lobby and moved without thinking to hold the door and take the bag. The child pressed sticky fingers to Lydia's cheek. Hi, he said. It was a declaration, not a greeting. Hi, Lydia said back, and something rearranged itself in her chest. Maybe the smallest furniture can transform a room. Tom, thinner and quieter, stood by the concierge stand, listening to a bellman describe how to gauge directions for a blind guest. He carried a notebook now and wrote in it. He had also learned to keep a water bottle behind the desk for people who arrived thirsty, not because it solved anything, but because it began to. Gloria took a break at the hearth and watched the lobby move like a dance whose steps had been relearned. She caught Marcus's eye and made a tiny motion with her chin toward the sign. He nodded. The brass letters caught the light. You belong here. The regional journalist returned. She watched. She left without asking questions and wrote later not about drama, but about practice, the way the desk agent looked up and made eye contact with the man in the work jacket, the way a manager knelt to a child's height to hand over a key card, the way apologies were offered without the defensive clause that begins with but. That night, the hotel hummed. Not the old hum, the anxiety buzz of brand management, but the warm, low vibration of a room where people exhale. Chapter 9. What it cost. Marcus drove out of the city the following Sunday to a small cemetery where the grass was kept in straight lines. He sat on a bench near a stone that said Everett and placed a sprig of lavender at its base. He waited, as if his father might arrive with a broom. I used to imagine you sitting on a bar stool in a lobby, watching me work, he said. I wanted you to see me be the boss. He smiled at how thin that desire felt now. But last night I realized I want you to see me be your son. He told his father about Lydia, about Tom, About Gloria's promotion and the sign that felt like a sentence answered finally after all the years of saying it only in policies. When he said he'd felt angry, he didn't apologize to the stone. His father had known that particular anger too well to require apology. On his way back to the car, he passed a boy kneeling at another grave, arranging marigolds, his mother standing behind him with a bag of tools. Life, he thought, is just this: 1,000 small arrangings, 1,000 careful choices to place one bright thing where another bright thing once was. Chapter 10. The call that keeps calling. On a gray afternoon a month later, his office phone lit again with a number from Columbus. He answered because he always would now. "I wanted to tell you something," Lydia said. Her voice sounded older in that particular way that doesn't mean aged but deepened. "Go on," he said, because he had learned the power of 2 words offered without commentary. "I shadowed housekeeping last week," she said. "I made beds with hospital corners and missed a hair on a pillowcase and had to strip an entire room again because of one hair. I followed Gloria through a floor where a kid had thrown up in the hallway and she cleaned it like love." Her breath wobbled. "I didn't understand what it took." He let silence sit, the kind of silence that invites telling the truth all the way down. "And I'm sorry," she added, the apology stripped of the words that usually costume it. "I didn't see you. I thought I was protecting something. It just wasn't the right thing." "Thank you," he said. "What are you protecting now?" She laughed, a surprised small sound. "People," she said. "I hope." "Good," he replied. "Keep going." When the call ended, he turned in his chair to look out at the city. He did not feel magnanimous, he felt responsible. It was different, it was heavier, it was better. Chapter 11. Lessons in public. At the next staff summit, he didn't open with numbers or the graph that showed RevPAR trending up like a kite in clean wind. He told the story of a night when Lavender turned to iron. He did not sanitize the sentence that had been said to him. He spoke it aloud and watched it land in a room where some faces flinched and some hardened and some went smooth with recognition because they had heard that sentence or one like it in their own skin. Then he read something from his notebook, the page corner folded and soft. "See every guest as a person, not a picture in your head." Start there. He didn't end with applause, he ended with instructions. "We will make mistakes," he said. "We'll fix them in daylight. We will not speed past harm to get to PR. We're going to change the way the ground feels under our feet, not just the way the ceiling looks." Gloria spoke next. She was not a performer, she didn't have to be. "When you hold a door," she said, "imagine you are holding it not just for a person, but for every door that was ever kept closed." They rolled the training out that month. It wasn't perfect, people stumbled, they apologetically said the wrong things. They learned. One property decided to add a quiet hour in the lobby every afternoon. Music lowered, lighting warmed, because a housekeeper in Omaha, inspired by Gloria, told a manager she had watched an autistic boy bolt at a saxophonist's high note. The company began keeping track not just of occupancy and ADR, but of something less tidy, compliments that used the words "felt seen." They pinned those compliments to the wall next to the fire plan, and when he traveled now, Marcus carried the same gray canvas backpack. He did it on purpose. He wanted to be misread by someone somewhere so that his staff had a chance to read themselves. Chapter 12. A night like any other, except it wasn't months later, Winter returned to Columbus with a sting that made cheeks pink up and noses run. A bus pulled up outside Sterling Heights and released a small chorus line of a high school choir, kids in mismatched coats, eyes wide. The lobby filled with bright noise. Lydia, now back at the desk but in a new role as lobby ambassador 2 days a week, laughed into the sound and caught herself. Laughing wasn't professional, she had believed once. Now she knew joy was part of service. A boy from the group trailed behind, hesitant. He looked at the chandelier like he had walked into a story too big to hold. Marcus, who had arrived that afternoon and not announced it, noticed him. He knelt, the way managers had been taught to when addressing kids, and said, "It catches light from everywhere." The boy smiled shy. "We don't have anything like this," he said, reverent. "We didn't either," Marcus replied. He straightened. "We built it." The choir sang in the lobby that night, just 2 songs, voices woven like knitted scarves. People stood with their cups and let harmony change the air. Even the security guards swayed. Halfway through the second song, Marcus felt someone step beside him. He didn't have to look to know it was Gloria. She smelled like lemon and laundry. They listened until the last note stretched thin, then snapped sweet. "Worth it." She asked, and she didn't mean the chandelier. Yes, he said, and he meant the work, the nights, the phone calls, the sentence he'd had to hear to write the others. Chapter 13, the last door. When he left that night, he didn't exit through the main revolving door, he walked around to the employee entrance. The sign was where it had always been, only the metal looked brighter now from so many fingertips. He touched the letters. If you think you can tell who belongs here, you don't belong behind this desk. Someone had added, with a thin marker, under the company font and under permission of no one but confidence, everyone belongs in front of it. He laughed quietly. He knew who had done that. He also knew he wouldn't ask them to remove it. He suspected, he hoped, that if he ordered it taken down, Gloria would simply write it again, and he would not stop her. Outside, the air hurt in the way cold sometimes does when it has done you a kindness. He looked back once at the lobby. Through the glass, he could see the chandelier and beneath it, a tangle of people who wouldn't look like a brochure if you arranged them, and who had never looked more at home. The phone in his pocket buzzed, an email from a guest in Omaha, praising a desk agent who had remembered her name ever since her first check-in. A direct message from a barista in Milwaukee, saying a man had cried when someone brought him water before he asked for it. A photo from Columbus, a toddler under the sign, fat fingers touching brass. He didn't answer right away. He stood in the cold and let himself feel what he rarely allowed space for, grief. For the years his father cleaned floors in places that wouldn't have opened a door for him. Joy, for the fact that he had spent his life building doors that did. The lesson that echoed far beyond the lobby wasn't that power can correct a clerk. It was that the person at the marble counter and the person with the mop are the same kind of person, carrying the same kind of heart, and the work is to arrange the light so everyone can see it. He turned his collar up and stepped into the night, the lavender spilling out as the door side shut behind him, a scent like memory, like home. And on the glass, the reflection caught him for a second. A man with a backpack, tired, unadorned, smiling because he knew, not from the deed in a safe or a name on a sign, but from the way the room had changed, that this place belonged to him in the only way that mattered. To anyone who has ever stood at a counter and been told they don't belong, he would have said, if he were the kind of man who ended nights with speeches, look at the door. Look at your hands. One of them can hold a key. The other can hold someone else's. You belong here.